this video, I am going to show you how to make these super cute mesh ballerina pumps. They actually come together so quickly, and all I needed was what's in front of me here. So let me talk you through it. I've got a pair of shoemaking lasts that come with matching insoles and soles. Now, it's really important to mention that these things come together as a set. There's no guarantee that these insoles and soles will fit on your own lasts. In fact, it'll be very unlikely. So if you're using the ICANMAKESHOES flat lasts, then you can get the matching insoles and soles and it'll be nice and easy for you. And then for the upper, for the mesh, I used this kind of millinery mesh that you would make a fascinator with. I think it's called like crinoline or something like that. I think it was about 10 pounds for this whole roll, and I didn't use very much of it. And then I just have some really nice black leather here. This is about 1 mil thick, and you can see it's kind of a soft temper to it. And I used that to cover my insoles for the inside of the pump, and also to make this nice binding around the top and down the back, and my Mary Jane strap as well. And last but not least, I used 2 of these little round sort of wobbly buckles for my straps. So yeah, this was actually a really quick, easy make, and I absolutely love how they turned out. Really nice. So let's dive in and I'll show you how to make them. I've started off with the ICANMAKESHOES ballet pump pattern, but I've done a hack on this pattern to actually make it a little bit narrower on the top line, which I just think is going to be a bit more flattering for this style of shoe. If you haven't already watched my pattern hack video, I'll link that somewhere. I'm going to start by trying to cut out the mesh because I feel like this is going to be the tricky part. This has absolutely 0 stretch in either direction, so I'm kind of hoping with the heat gun I can get it to sort of mold around the last. But like I said, this is a first for me, so we'll see what's going to happen. I think the way that I'm going to be able to cut this out best is to tape it, and that is if the tape actually sticks to the mesh. And then I'm just going to cut around it because I just think it'll be easier to cut out if I've got a more manageable piece. And I might get a few more bits of tape dotted around. Okay, so far so good. I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing for the other shoe. Okay, now that I've got my 2 mesh pieces, I'm gonna put them to the side there, and I'm gonna get my leather out. So I basically wanna make a binding that's gonna go around the top line. So in order to do that, I wanna follow the shape of the top line. So I've got a heat erasable pen here, and I just wanna use sort of as little as possible leather. So I'm just gonna trace it right up here. Okay, and then I'm gonna trace like, let's say about 1.5 centimeters, which kind of takes me to about there. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and cut that out. Okay, so I cut out 2 little U shapes for the top line, and I cut out 2 little strips as well. They're about 18 centimeters long, roughly. I'll probably trim some excess off this. And they are to go on my back seams as well. So you'll also notice I've got my heat gun here. My pen that I was using is a heat erasable pen, so I'm gonna give that a quick blast to get rid of the pen lines. Okay, so those pieces are all ready to go. If your leather's a bit too thick or doesn't have much stretch to it, you might also want to consider giving them a bit of a skive down with a knife just so that they are a bit easier to bend. Okay, so the other thing I have discovered with the heat gun is that it's going to come in really handy when sort of molding and shaping these pieces of mesh. So as you can see, this one's like not really going flat, but it is sort of quite malleable. So I'm going to hold it down flat, and I'm just going to show it the tiniest bit of heat because I don't want to melt anything. And you'll notice that that now is sitting much flatter. So that's gonna make life a lot easier for me when sticking these pieces on, and then also when actually molding this around the last to take the shape of a shoe. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get my solvent-based glue, and I'm gonna start gluing my U-bound top line pieces in place. Okay, so I've got some scrap paper here, and I'm gonna first glue the underside of one of these top line pieces, really making sure that I am getting the glue right up to the edge. Okay, and I'm just gonna pop that to the side to dry. And then on my mesh piece, I'm just putting the tiniest bit of glue here, like no more than a couple of mil deep, just because I want it to have something to stick to. And in theory, it should be kind of like going through the holes, but I am just gonna flip it and put a tiny bit on this side as well. Okay, now when it comes to sticking this, I like to put a line roughly down the center. You can of course get your ruler out and make this exact if you want to. And I am doing this over the top of the gluey side, so on the back, in case you're wondering. And it's just gonna really help me line everything up at the next stage. So let's line it up, basically. Okay, so I like to start at the end and just sort of pinch it over. And we're gonna work our way down, kind of trying to line up the mesh with that silver pen line that I've done. And when we get to this curve here, we are gonna need to put a few little tiny snips in just to make sure it gets around the corners. So I might do both sides first and then come back for the snips. And we want these to be really, really teeny tiny. Okay, so that's starting to look really, really good now. You can see I've got lots of tiny little snips in there. And then we of course are gonna stitch this on the sewing machine. But for now, I'm just gonna cut away the excess at the end. And we'll actually stitch that closed first, and then we'll put our strip over the top. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pop that one to the side and do the exact same thing on the other shoe. Okay, I have got those U-bound leather pieces on here. These are looking awesome. So let's jump on the sewing machine and stitch them in place. Okay, so I've got my sewing machine here. I'm gonna put it on a small stitch, about 3 mil. And I'm gonna stitch around the edge here, but it's really important that I make sure I'm getting both sides. So I kind of don't wanna go too close to the edge, but really making sure that I am grabbing both sides as I go. And you can always start and stop with a back stitch as well. Okay, they are looking awesome, and I can now get the backs stitched together. So I'm gonna actually turn this sort of inside out, and I'm just gonna stitch the backs together with a really tight stitch because this is obviously mesh. And I'm gonna stitch those together about 5 mil away from the edge. Okay, and then I'm just gonna fold the mesh. This is awesome because you don't need any glue or anything. You just literally push it where you want it to go, and I'm just folding it like back on itself to open up that seam, and that just flattens out so nicely. And then when it comes to this bulky bit at the top, I'm just gonna take my scissors and cut straight down in a little slant like that, so that I'm kind of reducing the bulk there. I could probably even cut a bit more of that off. The idea next is that this strip that I have here is just gonna basically go right over the top like that, and then stitch that in place. So let's get this one to that stage and then do the two of them together. So I'm just gonna set my sewing machine to the side for a moment, and I'm gonna get these back strips in place. So for that, I'm taking a bit of scrap paper and my solvent-based glue, and I'm gonna coat these in glue right up to the edge. So these strips that I did are about 1.5 centimeters wide, but you can do whatever you want here, really. The main thing is that where we've folded open those back seams, we just wanna make sure that they're not wider than our strip. So I am gonna trim the tiniest bit off here. And then I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue over the top of the seam, especially around the top area there. and flipping it this way and doing the same on this side. And I always like to glue one, and then while that's drying, I glue the other one. Just kind of helps me get them done a little bit faster, I guess. All right, so I am gonna start on one side, just really trying to make sure that I've got that seam in the center here. And then I'm just folding it over and making sure that the strap is lined up on both sides really nicely. And we'll do the same on the other side. And these are looking really, really good. I am going to just trim away the excess from the bottoms, and then we'll jump on the sewing machine and stitch them in place. One last thing before we jump on the sewing machine, if you've got a little hammer, you can just really sort of tap down that seam at the top there, because we really want to try and reduce the bulk as much as possible. So I'm just gonna give that a little tap. And you'd be surprised at how much of a difference that really makes, especially to the comfort of the shoe. Like, I can just instantly feel that, well, not really feel it anymore. Whereas before I could feel quite a bump in there. Okay, so we're gonna jump on the sewing machine again. So we're just gonna stitch up to where our U-binding is, across the bottom of it, and then back down the other side. Okay, that one is looking awesome. And on to the next one. Okay, so these mesh pumps are looking so good. I'm really happy with them. And that could be it at this stage. You could just go ahead and last them as they are. But I'm actually going to take it a step further and make a little Mary Jane strap to go over the top. So I'm going to move on from these to do my little straps now. So I'll pop them to the side, and I've got myself a couple of these buckles that we just got in stock because they're really cute. They're round and they're sort of a little bit wobbly, which I really like. And you'll notice I put some buckle elastic through there. This piece is roughly 6 centimeters long, and it's like not essential. You could just put a strap of leather like directly through this buckle, but I had some buckle elastic on hand, and I like to use it for things like this because I am going to put this strap sort of right across the top of the foot. So I want to make sure when I'm walking I've got like a little bit of movement, and I think that buckle elastic will really help. So I am gonna pop those guys to the side, and I've got 2 strips of leather here, rough. They are about 35 centimeters long, and I'm gonna cut my straps into those. But first thing I wanna do is actually glue these 2 pieces together, just so that I've got like a nice kind of sturdy strap that's backed. And then I'm going to cut my straps out, and then I'm going to put my buckles in. So let's start by sticking these 2 together. And I'm using my water-based glue to do this, but you could use the solvent-based glue as well. But I always just use the water-based whenever I can because it's non-toxic and just less smelly. Okay, and then I'm going to stick these 2 pieces together. If you were using a fabric, or even for that matter, a thinner leather, you might also want to consider putting a reinforcement tape down the center of your straps. And if you were going to do that, I'd probably suggest you actually cut your straps out first and then glue them together. But I'm going to do a little strap hack here, so that's why I'm doing it this way. And that feels really nice and sturdy. It's still got a little bit of stretch to it, which I want, but not too much. So let me grab my special machine and show you my strap hack. So this is a strap cutting machine. I don't expect you to have a strap cutting machine at home. You might do. But if you don't, a good old-fashioned metal ruler and a sharp craft knife will do an excellent job. But if you do happen to have one of these, you can whiz it through really quickly. So all I'm going to do is place this in the machine and roll it through to cut my straps. And there we have 2 perfectly cut straps and some scrap. So let's pop this away and then get our buckles into here. So let's start by getting our buckle in. So I'm actually going to open up the end of this one And we're going to sandwich our buckle elastic in there. And we'll probably need a little bit of glue in between those layers actually. So let's take a little bit of glue here, and I'm just going to close up the buckle elastic so that that doesn't move around inside the strap. I've used way too much glue here, just FYI as a reference. And all that means is I'm just going to have to wait for it to dry. And then we'll just put a bit of extra glue in here as well, so that when we're ready to seal those up, they are ready to stick. Okay, so I've got those buckles in place, and now I kind of just want to figure out like roughly how long they want to be. And I would say if you want the buckle sitting just above the top line of the shoe, then we could probably just go ahead and cut that at the bottom of the lasting allowance, because that should be plenty of space. And then we'll just do the same thing on the other side. And then same thing, if that one's going around, I can see that that's loads of excess, so probably quite a bit longer than we want it to be. So let's pretend that if it was done up, we wanted it to sort of sit around about there. And I've just pulled out my last so that I can sort of roughly guess how long this wants to be. We can start to get a bit of a visual here. This is going to be fun to last, but we can see where it's sitting on the last nice and high, so I'm happy with that. And if I want my buckle sitting like roughly there, then this strap could get cut around about there. So we'll take about that much off the end, and I'll just copy that across on this one as well. Okay, so I have got all of my straps prepared. I'm now going to grab my sewing machine and stitch these closed. So I want to stitch really nice and close to the edge on these pieces. It can be quite tricky when you're going around the buckle, and that's why the buckle elastic kind of comes in handy, because you can sort of move it out of the way to get the foot as close as possible, but you might find that you need to stitch across the top first and put a back stitch on both sides and then just go up the sides, but that'll sort of depend on your sewing machine. So I'm gonna whiz around these, making sure to do a back stitch at the start and at the end. All right, straps are all stitched. So we're ready to put this away and start turning these into a pair of shoes. Okay, so in order to turn these into shoes, we are going to need to make some insoles so that we can wrap this onto something. So I'm going to be doing my pre-made insole combo, but if you don't have these, you can just get 2mm thick Texon board sheets. In fact, I have some here. So yeah, you can get a sheet of Texon board, sort of like that. And then you can just cut your insoles out of this using your last bottom pattern. And if you're wondering what the last bottom pattern is, it's the pattern of the bottom of the last, like that. So my insoles are actually already cut exactly in that shape, so I don't need any of this stuff. I'm good to go. Now, usually if I was making a pair of normal ballet pumps, I wouldn't do anything with these at this stage. I would use them as they are, last my shoes around it, and then at the very end I'd put in what's called an insole sock with some foam padding, and that would make it look sort of beautiful on the inside. But because this shoe is see-through, essentially, I am actually going to put some padding on these insoles now, and I'm also going to cover them with this nice black leather at this stage, so that when I put the mesh layer over the top, you can sort of see the insole and it looks all neat and lovely. So you can either just go ahead and cover these in leather as they are, but if you want to add a little extra comfort, I like to put in some squidgy foam. So this is just 2mm thick foam. You can use kids craft foam, is a fun hack. So I'm just gonna trace around these onto the foam. And the reason I'm tracing around them is just to get a rough guide, and then I'm going to glue them straight away without actually cutting them out. I will cut them out, but not yet. So I'm putting my glue right over the top of that line, and I'm just following it the whole way around, and then I will go ahead and fill in the middle. And you can see it just like soaks into this foam pretty much straight away. Now, there's a reason I'm gluing the foam first, and that's because, like I said, it kind of soaks into the foam. So that can just hang out and be drying while I glue my insoles. So just taking the glue right up to the edge and then filling in the middle. Okay, and then after that's had a few minutes to dry, we can go ahead and stick it down. Just trying to place it within the pen lines that you drew earlier. And then we can go ahead and cut around the foam. Okay, and now that we have made them super comfy, let's cover them in leather. So I think this area down here actually looks pretty good. I might do something like that. So position your insoles on there, making sure you've got a little bit of space around it, because we're going to need some excess for folding it over the edge. So I usually trace around the insole, and then we want to add about 1 centimeter of excess the whole way around. And that's really, really important. But it also doesn't have to be neat or exact, because we're going to trim a lot of it off afterwards. So as long as you've got at least 1 centimeter, then you're kind of good to go. Like you can see in this area, it's pretty close, but all good. And then you can go ahead and cut them out. So we're going to go back to our glue, our water-based glue. And again, I'm going to glue the foam first because that takes longer to dry. And I'm going to glue right up to the edge and then fill in the middle. And then we'll go ahead and glue the leather pieces up right up to the edge as well. Just make sure, it goes without saying, but you are gluing the underside of the leather, not the right side. And I'm just going to put a bit of scrap paper there to protect my table. Okay, so once they're all glued up, we are going to place our insoles right in the center, like that. And we're going to take our glue. In fact, just before we take our glue, we'll just flip them over and give them a nice smooth. Make sure there are no lumps and bumps, bits of glue, anything we don't want. And then we're going to take a strip of glue and just put it around the outside edge of the insoles, just so that when we wrap that leather over, it's got something to stick to. Now, when it comes to these little corners, you just want to put a few snips around there, just tiny ones, so that when we fold it open, they sort of open up like that. And then we can just go ahead and fold all the leather over. Now, when you get to the toe and the heel area, you're going to want to really pull it right over the edge. And we're sort of creating these little pleats underneath the insole. We really want to make sure that they are not on the edge of the insole there, that they are right underneath. So you may need to lift this up and put it down a few times. But it's really important that you get them as far away from the edge as you possibly can. And the trick here is lots of little pleats is definitely better than a few big ones. Okay, and then same thing at the back. Okay, that's looking really beautiful. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll trim away the excess. Okay, so next thing we want to do is trim these as flat as we possibly can. So if you've got some scissors, you can sort of go in and snip away those little pleats, or even like a craft knife, you can just cut them all off. Or even better, if you have got one of these, which is called a safety beveler, you can just go ahead and shave all the excess off like that. Really just creating a super, super flat surface. So if you're wondering to yourself, is it flat enough? I know this sounds really obvious, but feel it with your finger. If it's flat enough. If you can feel bumps, it's not flat enough. Okay, so that's looking beautiful and flat. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same with the other one, but just to show you why I did that, because if we place that over the top, we're gonna be able to sort of see the insole from the side there. So that's why we want it to be beautiful at this stage. So I'm gonna get that one trimmed up and then we can start molding these over the lasts. Okay, let's start putting these together. So I've got some masking tape here and I'm just breaking off 2 little bits and I'm just gonna place my insole onto the base of my last and I'm just wrapping a little bit of masking tape over the toe and the same thing, just a little bit of masking tape over the heel. And that's just really to hold everything in place while I do this. I'm gonna leave that one to the side. And then when it comes to this piece, I'm gonna kind of use the heat gun here to mold it into shape. But I am gonna put a little bit of masking tape on the back as well. So on the back of your last, you should have a marked on back height point. And I'm just gonna match the back onto that back height point and just put a little bit of masking tape over there like that. Okay, so the way that I'm gonna do this is pretty much using the heat gun to kind of melt this into the shape of the last. But I use the word melt lightly here because we don't actually wanna melt anything. We just wanna heat it enough so that it just gently takes the shape. And just be really careful that your back height point doesn't shift as we go. So safety warning, as soon as you start using this heat gun, that bit gets really, really hot. So just face it away from you when you're not using it. And in fact, I'm just gonna change how I'm doing my masking tape. So I'm gonna place it along the top, so along the top of the leather piece. And then I'm gonna put it on there and match the back height. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to apply a little bit of heat around the top here. So I'm kind of stretching it forward and just making sure that this kind of takes to the shape of the last. And we're going to do this just slowly, bit by bit. I think it might be helpful to actually get the bottom or the back part in place so that we can actually put it down as well. So to do that, I am gonna just place this down for a sec and I'm gonna get my solvent-based glue. So I'm gonna actually just lightly remove the tape from the back here and I'm just gonna place that tape on the side instead, just to make sure we're holding the insole to the shoe. And I'm just gonna apply a bit of glue around the back on the underside of the insole. And then I'm just applying a little bit of glue on the underside of that little strip there and just on the mesh itself, making sure I'm only really getting the glue on the bit that I know is gonna go or get wrapped underneath. So now I'm gonna apply a bit of heat. Again, we'll do it from the top. And then we're just gonna sort of wrap it around underneath there. So far, so good with that. So that kind of means I can like put the back of the shoe down now so that I can start working on the fronts and the sides. So before I do that though, it was really handy to have that glue ready to just stick. So I am gonna glue the rest of it. And to do that, I'm just gonna put a strip of glue around the whole thing, around the whole underside of the insole. And you can just go right over the top of that tape for the time being. And just put a little bit of glue on the edge of the mesh as well. Again, just making sure you're only putting glue on the part that's gonna get wrapped underneath. So I'm gonna start with the side again, just by applying heat. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side here. Okay, this is looking really good. So at this point, before I do the toe, I'm gonna take away the tape and I'm just gonna put some extra glue under there where the tape was. And while I'm at it, I'll probably remove this tape from the side here as well. And we'll just fill in that gap as well. We are officially ready to do the toe section. So I'm gonna do this nice and slow and we're just gonna do it bit by bit. That has lasted absolutely beautifully. I'm really, really happy with that. So at this stage, I'm gonna let that cool down. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other shoe, and then we will attach our little straps. So I've already attached the strap on this one, and I'm really, really happy with how it's looking. So let's go ahead and do the other one together. First and foremost, I did take my hole punch and punch a little hole in the end of the strap there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and buckle that one up. And I want the side that has the buckle on it to go on the outside of the shoe. And because I've got buckle elastic in there, when we actually stretch it over, we want to make sure that the elastic is at its most stretched. So when we're positioning it, it should be in the stretched position. And that's how we sort of know that once we take it off the last and put it on the foot, that it's gonna fit and not actually end up being too baggy with the elastic there. So what I'm gonna do is flip that over. I'm gonna take my solvent-based glue, because we want this to have a really nice strong stick to it. And I'm just gonna put a bit of glue on the ends of the straps. I'm just gonna do roughly 1 centimeter of glue, maybe 1.5 centimeters actually. And I want the glue to sort of, or the strap to sit roughly in this area. So I'm just gonna put a bit of glue right along the edge there. The reason I put so much, well, not so much, but the reason I make the area so long is so that if I want the strap to be a little bit further forward or a little bit further back, I've got glue there ready to move it. And then I'm just gonna give the glue on the strap and on the bottom of the shoe a quick blast with the heat gun, just to speed up the drying process and to reactivate that glue. Okay, so now it's time to position the strap. I really want to make sure I'm kind of matching it with the first shoe. I'm kind of placing it so that the buckle is sitting just above the top line here. And remember, I'm stretching the elastic as well. And then just sticking that underneath. And then before I commit to it, I'm just going to check if they're sort of going in on the same position. From this side, they are going in on the exact same position, so I'm happy with that. And on that side, they are too. That was a fluke, I'll be honest. Usually they don't go perfectly, and that would be totally fine and normal. If they don't, you simply lift it up and you move it back a little bit or move it forward a little bit. That was a total happy accident, so yeah. Don't be discouraged if yours doesn't do that first go. So, awesome. If we put the two together, we just want to really look at everything, make sure they match, make sure nothing is standing out to us, because this is really the last chance we have to make any changes before we put our soles on. So I am always recommending that you look from above and get a bird's eye view, because it'll really help you to see if anything is standing out. So there's one final thing I like to do once you're happy with the positioning of your straps and you're not going to change anything. And by the way, this is totally optional, but I do recommend it, is I'm going to take my safety beveler again, and I'm just going to shave some of the bulk away from the straps, really making sure that I'm not going too close to the edge, because we don't want to see where I'm cutting it, but we just don't want to feel this under the foot like a big bulky bit. Just try and flatten it out as much as you can. Okay, they are looking really good now. I've flattened them out as much as I can at the bottom. And actually, I could do with taking a tiny bit off the back here as well. Just reducing bulk wherever we can. And that one is now ready for me to attach my sole onto. And we'll do the same on this side. So we can go ahead to our last stage, which is attaching our soles. All right, so as you can see, I've taken the lasts out and these are looking really, really cute. I have already put the sole onto this one and I'm so pleased with how it's looking. It was actually really easy to get the sole on. So let's do it together on this one. So you'll notice that I have in front of me my pre-made soles. It's so important that you remember that you can only use these if you're using the I Can Make Shoes lasts, because they actually fit together. And the same thing goes with the insole that we had earlier. They all sort of fit together. So if you're using your own last, there's no guarantee, and it's highly unlikely that this sole will fit on it. So just something to keep in mind. And by the way, if you have used your own last, that's totally fine. You'll just have to build up your sole from scratch. All right, so to do this, we're gonna start by placing our shoe into the sole. And then I have here a heat erasable pen. If you don't have one of these, you could just use like a pencil or something like that. But it's pretty much just for us to mark on where our sole is coming to, so we know where we're supposed to glue up to. So on the mesh, I just kind of do something like that. You just want to make sure that you are actually pushing it like down into the sole before you draw this line on. Okay, and it might be a little bit difficult to see on camera, but I have just got a little white line all the way around, and it's kind of like just up the edge of the shoe. So I am going to start by gluing up the sole, and then we'll move on to the shoe. So again, I'm using my solvent-based glue for this. That's really important. The aim of the game here is that I'm kind of putting the glue like up the lip. So there's a little ridge around here, and I really need to make sure that there's glue on the inside of the ridge, and that's so important for it actually sticking to our shoe. So the priority here is that we're going to go around that edge, and then we're going to fill in the middle. And then once we've got that glued up, we'll just set that to the side to dry. And then we're going to come to our shoe itself. So to glue this up, I'm just going to take my glue right up to that white pen line. And so important here that around the straps, we're really making sure we get the glue up the side of the strap as well, so that it can stick nicely around the strap. And the priority here is that we're going to go all the way around the edge, making sure we get the glue right up to that white pen line. And then once we've gone all the way around, we're also going to fill in the middle as well. All right, so they've had about 10-ish minutes to dry. I'm going to give this a quick blast. I'll give them both a quick blast with the heat gun, but I do just want to say, like, at this point, you want to be so careful about adding heat, because the last thing you would want at this point is to get a little tear or like melt a bit or something like that. So just be careful at this point, because they're almost done. So the glue should be feeling like pretty much dry when you are ready to stick it. And then the heat gun just kind of reactivates it all a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna start by sending the toe in and sticking that sort of right as far forward as we can. So far, so good. And then without letting those two bits touch, we're gonna kind of center it at the back. And just make sure that you're sending the heel section right in there as well. And then you can really press it down. That has gone on so nicely. Give it a really good pinch around the straps, by the way, because we want those bits to be stuck down really securely. Okay, and there we have our finished ballerina pumps, mesh ballerina pumps. I am so happy with how they turned out. A couple of things to mention: you totally could have stitched the strap to the side of the shoe if you wanted to, but I kind of wanted it to be loose, to give me a bit more flexibility about where it goes. Also, remember, I raised the top line of my pattern before I started. So if you wanted this to be a bit more of an open style, then you could just use the normal ballet pump pattern. And what else can I tell you? Nothing. They were a very quick make, and I'm excited to try them on. So let's see how they fit.